I stood in my childhood kitchen as my father screamed, "Get out, you lowlife!" After discovering I dropped out of college 3 years ago to start a business. My mother cried, while my brother Jake called me worthless trash for not having a degree like the rest of the family. Dad threw my belongings onto the porch, yelling about bringing shame to our respectable family name. As neighbors watched the humiliating scene, I quietly picked up my laptop bag containing my cryptocurrency wallet worth $41 million and walked away forever. The beat-up Honda Civic rattled as I drove away from the house where I'd lived my entire 27 years. My hands shook on the steering wheel, not from fear, but from 3 years of suppressed anger finally breaking free. Every insult my family had hurled at me echoed in my mind as I pulled into the parking lot of a Hampton Inn 20 minutes from home. Sitting in that sterile hotel room, I opened my laptop and stared at the screen that had changed my life. The numbers hadn't changed. $41,300,742. My cryptocurrency portfolio spread across multiple wallets, each one representing months of careful trading, strategic investments, and sleepless nights learning blockchain technology. The irony burned like acid in my chest. While my father built his identity around his accounting degree from State University, while my mother bragged about her education credentials at dinner parties, while Jake flaunted his MBA at every family gathering, I had quietly built a fortune that dwarfed all their combined salaries. They called me a failure for dropping out of engineering school, never bothering to ask what I'd been doing with my time. 3 years ago, when Bitcoin traded at $300 per coin, I made the decision that would change everything. My student loan money sat in my checking account, $18,000 meant for tuition and living expenses. Instead of attending classes about differential equations and thermodynamics, I spent weeks researching cryptocurrency markets, reading white papers, and studying market patterns until my eyes burned. My family assumed I was playing video games in my basement bedroom. Dad would stomp down the stairs during my trading sessions, lecturing me about responsibility and ambition. "Look at your brother," he'd say, pointing upstairs where Jake worked on his business degree coursework. "That's what success looks like, Les. Not whatever you're doing down here with those computer games." If only he'd known I was managing trading accounts for clients across 3 continents. By month 6, word had spread through encrypted forums about the kid from suburban Ohio who could predict market movements with uncanny accuracy. Millionaire investors started reaching out through secure channels, asking me to manage portions of their portfolios. My commission fees alone exceeded Dad's annual salary by the end of year 1. The cryptocurrency boom of the following year turned my careful investments into a goldmine. Bitcoin reached $20,000 per coin. Ethereum skyrocketed from $40 to over $1,000. The alternative coins I'd researched and invested in during their initial offerings multiplied by hundreds of percentage points. My net worth climbed from 6 figures to 7 figures to 8 figures, while my family continued mocking my lack of formal education. I'd maintained the charade perfectly, driving the same Honda I'd bought in high school, wearing thrift store clothes, eating ramen noodles when family members were around. My parents never questioned why I didn't ask for money, or why I never seemed stressed about employment. They were too busy congratulating themselves on Jake's corporate job and planning for his upcoming wedding to notice their other son had become wealthier than everyone in our small town combined. The hardest part wasn't hiding the money. The hardest part was watching my family's disappointment grow deeper each year. Mom would introduce me to her friends as our Les, who's still figuring things out. Dad stopped mentioning me during conversations about his children's achievements. Extended family gatherings became exercises in dodging questions about my future plans, while listening to endless praise for Jake's promotion to regional sales manager. But tonight, everything changed. Dad's final explosion came after he'd discovered I never completed my degree, a secret I'd maintained by forging semester grade reports and making up stories about delayed graduation. His rage reached nuclear levels when he realized I'd been lying and living like a parasite under his roof. The words lowlife and trash would replay in my mind forever, but they'd also set me free. I opened my secure trading app and initiated the largest transaction of my life. $4.2 million transferred from my investment accounts to a real estate acquisition fund. By morning, I'd be the owner of a beachfront property in Florida that would make my family's suburban McMansion look like a garden shed. My phone buzzed with a text from my private jet charter service. Flight arrangements confirmed for tomorrow morning, Mr. Thompson. Destination Naples, Florida. Ground transportation and property representative will meet you upon arrival. I'd been planning this escape for months, researching properties and legal structures to protect my wealth once I revealed it. The villa I'd purchased sight unseen sat on 2 acres of pristine Gulf Coast waterfront, complete with private beach access, and enough space to never see another human being if I chose. Sleep came fitfully that night, interrupted by dreams of family dinners, where I was treated as an equal, where my accomplishments mattered more than my diploma. But those were fantasies from a different life. The real Les Thompson had 41 million reasons to start fresh tomorrow, and a family that would never understand how badly they'd miscalculated their failure of a son. At 6 a.m, I checked out of the Hampton Inn and drove to the private airfield, where a Cessna Citation waited on the tarmac. The pilot, a professional woman named Captain Sarah, greeted me with the respect I'd never received at home. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. Beautiful day for flying. Your property manager called to confirm everything's ready for your arrival." As Ohio disappeared below the clouds, I finally allowed myself to imagine what life could look like, without constant judgment, without hiding who I'd become, without pretending to be less than I was. Florida stretched ahead, like a promise of freedom, and for the first time in 3 years, I smiled without forcing it. The Gulf of Mexico stretched endlessly before me as I stood on the wraparound deck of my new home, watching dolphins play in the crystalline water just 50 yards from shore. The villa was everything the listing had promised, and more: 6,000 square feet of Mediterranean architecture, with soaring ceilings, marble floors, and floor-to-ceiling windows that made the boundary between inside and outside disappear. My property manager, a sharp-eyed woman named Linda Castellanos, had handled every detail of the transition. Within hours of my arrival, she'd arranged for utilities, high-speed internet security system activation, and even stocked the refrigerator with groceries. The master suite overlooked the private beach through a wall of glass that made me feel like I was floating above the water when I woke each morning. "Mr. Thompson," Linda said during our second-day walkthrough, "I've identified 2 excellent candidates for your household staff if you're interested. Carmen Rodriguez has 15 years of experience managing luxury properties, and Roy Patterson maintains the grounds for several estates in the area. Both come with impeccable references." I hired them both immediately. Carmen turned out to be a godsend, a bilingual woman in her 40s, who managed the villa with quiet efficiency and genuine warmth. She organized my scattered life with the same precision I applied to cryptocurrency markets, creating systems for everything from meal planning to maintenance schedules. Roy, a soft-spoken man in his 50s, transformed the already beautiful landscaping into something that belonged in architectural magazines. For the first time since building my fortune, I lived openly wealthy. I bought a Tesla Model S. To replace the Honda, installed a home theater system that cost more than most people's cars, and furnished the villa with pieces that made me smile, instead of hiding my success. The infinity pool seemed to pour directly into the Gulf, creating an optical illusion that never stopped amazing me. 3 weeks into my new life, I made a decision that would change everything. Sitting on my deck during golden hour, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose, I took a photograph and posted it to my social media accounts. The image showed my shadow against the infinity pool with the Gulf beyond, captioned simply, "New Chapter." I'd been careful to keep my social media presence minimal, during my hidden years posting occasionally about generic topics to avoid family suspicion. This single photo represented my first authentic post, the first glimpse of my real life shared with the outside world. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly that glimpse would travel. Marcus Peterson, my closest friend from high school, called within 3 hours. "Dude, where the hell are you?" He demanded, his voice a mixture of excitement and confusion. "That sunset shot is insane. Are you on vacation or something?" Marcus had been the one person who never judged me during my family's increasingly vocal disappointment. He'd kept my friendship when others drifted away, assuming I was heading nowhere fast. His genuine happiness about my apparent good fortune made me want to share more of the truth. "Not vacation," I said, watching Carmen arrange fresh flowers in the living room below. "I moved to Florida, permanently." "No way. How can you afford Florida? I mean, no offense, but last time we talked you were still living with your parents." I'd practiced this conversation in my mind countless times. "I've been working in cryptocurrency. Things went better than expected." Marcus whistled low. "Cryptocurrency, man. I knew you were into computers, but I didn't know you were making real money. Good for you, Les. Your parents must be so proud." The irony made me laugh bitterly. "They don't exactly know yet." "What do you mean they don't know? How do you move to Florida without telling your family?" I explained the previous month's explosion, Dad's ultimatum, my decision to leave permanently. Marcus listened with growing amazement as I described the years of hiding my success, the constant criticism, the final confrontation that led to my exile. "So you just left without telling them how well you'd done?" They made it clear what they thought of me, Marcus. I saw no reason to argue. After we hung up, I felt lighter, having shared the truth with someone who cared about me rather than my credentials. But I'd underestimated how interconnected small-town social networks could be, especially among people who'd grown up together. The next afternoon, while I was reviewing investment portfolios by the pool, Carmen brought me my phone. "Mr. Thompson, you have several missed calls from someone named Amy Thompson, family member." Chach. Amy was my cousin Dad's sister's daughter, a notorious gossip who treated family information like currency. I'd forgotten she still followed my social media accounts, and I'd certainly underestimated her detective skills. The voicemail she'd left was breathless with excitement. "Les, oh my God, I saw your post, where are you? That place looks incredible. Call me back immediately." But Amy wasn't the type to wait for return calls. While I debated how much to reveal, she was already in motion. Marcus, it turned out, had run into her at the Kroger grocery store that evening. In his enthusiasm about my apparent success, he'd mentioned Florida, the villa, and my cryptocurrency business. Amy had pumped him for details with the skill of a professional interrogator. Within 24 hours of my sunset post, my mother's phone was ringing. "Janet, you're never going to believe what I just heard about Les," Amy announced without preamble. I didn't learn about this conversation until later, but Amy's breathless account painted a picture that transformed me overnight from family disappointment to mysterious success story. She'd done her own research looking up property values in Naples, cross-referencing my location data from social media, even calling a real estate contact to ask about recent luxury sales in the area. My mother's first call came at 9 that evening. I let it go to voicemail, but her message was impossible to ignore. "Les, honey," Amy called with the most amazing news. "We had no idea about your success. Please call me back. We need to talk." Jake called next, his tone completely different from our last conversation. Gone was the condescending older brother who'd called me trash. This Jake sounded almost nervous. "Hey, little brother. Mom told me about Florida. Sounds like you've been busy. Really busy. Call me when you get a chance." Dad didn't call that night, but I knew he would soon. My family had discovered their failure had become a millionaire, and everything was about to change. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my deck watching the moon cast silver ripples across the water. My peaceful 3 weeks of anonymity were ending, but at least this time, I held all the cards. The transformation from worthless trash to mysterious success story had taken exactly one social media post and a chance encounter at a grocery store. Soon, I'd learned just how dramatically a family's attitude could change when $41 million entered the conversation. My phone didn't stop ringing for 3 days straight. Text messages flooded in every hour, each more desperate and apologetic than the last. The family that had disowned me 26 days earlier suddenly couldn't live without immediate reconciliation. Mom called first with tears in her voice, a completely different person from the woman who'd stood crying in our kitchen while Dad threw my belongings outside. Les, sweetheart, I've been so worried about you. We never meant for things to go that far. Your father was just stressed about work, and we were concerned about your future. We always knew you were special. The lie came so smoothly, I almost admired her technique. We always knew was particularly creative, since they'd spent 3 years telling me the exact opposite. But I let her talk, curious about how thoroughly they'd rehearsed this new narrative. Amy told us you've done incredibly well for yourself, honey. We're so proud. So proud. I've been telling everyone at church about your success in computers. Mrs. Patterson asked if you could help her grandson with his technology business. Technology business. They still couldn't bring themselves to say cryptocurrency, probably because they didn't understand it well enough to use the term convincingly. But the speed of their reputation rehabilitation impressed me. Within 72 hours, I'd apparently transformed from family embarrassment to local success story worth bragging about at church. Jake's approach was more calculated. He called while I was having coffee on my deck, watching Roy trim the palm trees that lined my property. His voice carried the smooth confidence he'd perfected during his MBA program, the tone he used when pitching business deals. Les, man, I owe you a huge apology. I was completely out of line the other night. Stress from work, you know how it is. Sarah and I have been talking, and we realize we never really understood what you were working on. Cryptocurrency, right? That's fascinating stuff. Really forward-thinking. Sarah was his wife, a kindergarten teacher, who'd barely spoken to me during 2 years of family gatherings. Now, apparently, she'd been analyzing cryptocurrency markets and found them fascinating. We'd love to come visit you in Florida, Jake continued. The kids would love to see the ocean. Plus, Sarah and I have been thinking about investment opportunities. Maybe you could give us some advice about financial planning. Financial planning. The same brother who'd called me worthless trash now wanted investment advice. The same brother who'd mocked my lack of formal education was suddenly interested in learning from me. I almost laughed at the transparency of it. But Dad's approach was the most sophisticated. Instead of calling directly, he hired an attorney named Douglas Morrison to reach out as an intermediary. Morrison called on a Thursday afternoon, while I was swimming laps in my pool, claiming to represent concerned family members who wish to repair damaged relationships. Mr. Thompson, your family has asked me to facilitate a conversation about reconciliation. They understand there's been a significant misunderstanding, and they're hoping to make amends. Your father, particularly, wants to express his regret about the unfortunate incident last month. Unfortunate incident. As if screaming, "Get out, you lowlife," and throwing my belongings into the yard was an accidental misunderstanding rather than the culmination of 3 years of systematic emotional abuse. Morrison continued with carefully neutral language designed to sound legal and official. They've also mentioned concerns about proper estate planning and family financial coordination. Perhaps we could arrange a meeting to discuss these matters in a productive environment. Estate planning, family financial coordination. They weren't even pretending this was purely about emotional reconciliation anymore. They wanted access to my money, and they'd hired legal representation to pursue it. The most manipulative approach came through my grandmother Grace, Dad's mother, who appeared at my villa unannounced on a Saturday morning. Carmen answered the door to find a tiny silver-haired woman in her 80s, looking confused and worried. "Excuse me, dear, but I'm looking for my grandson Les. I believe this is his address." Grace was the one family member I'd always genuinely loved. She'd defended me during family gatherings when others criticized my choices, always asking about my interests instead of my job prospects. Seeing her standing on my doorstep filled me with both joy and suspicion about how she'd found me. "Grandma Grace, what are you doing here?" She hugged me tightly. then stepped back to examine my face with concern. Les, honey, your father told me you were having problems. Financial problems. Emotional problems. He said you ran away and might be in trouble. I've been so worried. I invited her inside, watching her eyes widen as she took in the marble foyer, the soaring ceilings, the view of the Gulf through the living room windows. Her confusion was genuine and heartbreaking. I don't understand, sweetheart. Your father said you were struggling, but this place is beautiful. How can you afford something like this? The manipulation was masterful. Dad had sent Grace to me with a completely false story, knowing I'd never lie to her or turn her away. She genuinely believed I was in crisis, that her visit was a rescue mission rather than a scouting expedition. I spent the day showing her around the villa, explaining my cryptocurrency business in terms she could understand, watching her pride and amazement grow. Grace had no idea she was gathering intelligence that would be reported back to my parents within hours of her return to Ohio. Your father will be so relieved to know you're safe and successful, she said as Carmen drove her to the airport that evening. He's been beside himself with worry. Maybe this will help heal the rift between you. After Grace left, I sat in my home office reviewing security camera footage from the past week. What I discovered made my blood run cold. A rental car had been parked across from my gated entrance 3 different times, always during daylight hours when I was most likely to be visible. License plate searches revealed the car had been rented by a private investigation firm based in Tampa. My family wasn't just attempting reconciliation. They were conducting surveillance. I called Linda Castellanos immediately. Linda, I need enhanced security for the property. Cameras, upgraded gate system, and a background check on anyone who asks about me or this address. Of course, Mr. Thompson. Has there been a specific threat? My family is investigating my finances. I need to know exactly what they're planning before I decide how to respond. That night, I hired my own private investigator, a former FBI agent named Patricia Wells, who specialized in corporate and family financial crimes. If my family wanted to play detective, I'd make sure I was several steps ahead of whatever scheme they were developing. The desperate reconciliation attempts were just the beginning. Soon, I'd learn that my family's interest in my wealth went far beyond simple greed. They were planning something that would either destroy their lives or mine, depending on who moved first. The call came at 5:30 in the morning, jolting me awake in my master suite. Grace's voice was shaking with panic and exhaustion. Les, honey, you need to come home immediately. Your father collapsed last night. He's in intensive care at University Hospital. I was on the phone with my pilot before Grace finished explaining the details. Dad had apparently suffered a massive heart attack while reviewing financial documents in his home office. Mom found him unconscious at his desk around midnight, surrounded by papers and medical bills I'd never heard about before. The doctors say the next 48 hours are critical. Grace continued, her voice breaking. He's been asking for you, sweetheart. He wants to make things right before it might be too late. The flight to Ohio felt endless. Despite everything Dad had done, the thought of losing him forever filled me with unexpected grief. Our relationship had been damaged, maybe destroyed, but he was still my father. The man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd stayed up all night helping me with science fair projects, who'd been proud of my accomplishments before college became his obsession. Mom met me at the hospital, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked older than I remembered, more fragile. Les, thank God you came. He's been so worried about you, so sorry about what happened. This whole situation has been eating at him for weeks. The intensive care unit was stark and intimidating, full of machines that beeped and hummed around Dad's motionless form. He looked small and vulnerable in the hospital bed, nothing like the intimidating figure who'd ordered me from our house 6 weeks earlier. When his eyes opened and focused on me, they filled with tears. Les, he whispered through the oxygen mask. I'm sorry, son. So sorry about everything. The next 3 days blurred together in a haze of medical consultations, family conversations, and emotional reconciliation that felt too good to be true. Dad spoke weakly, but constantly about his regrets, his pride in my success, his hope that we could rebuild our relationship. Mom hovered nearby, facilitating healing conversations and promising that everything would be different going forward. Jake arrived with Sarah and their kids subdued and apologetic. The whole family seemed transformed by the crisis, united in grief and genuine remorse. Even my extended relatives, cousins, and aunts and uncles who joined in criticizing my choices called to offer support and express admiration for my achievements. On the third day, Dad's condition stabilized enough for him to be moved to a regular room. That evening, the family gathered for what Mom described as an important discussion about moving forward together. Dad sat propped up in his hospital bed, looking weak, but determined. Les, I need to tell you something that might be hard to hear. The heart attack wasn't just stress. I've been hiding some health problems, some financial problems because I didn't want to worry anyone. He explained that he'd been diagnosed with advanced heart disease 6 months earlier, requiring expensive treatments that insurance didn't fully cover. The accounting firm where he'd worked for 20 years was downsizing, and his job security was questionable. Medical bills had been mounting for months. That's why I was so worried about your future son. I knew I might not be around much longer to help if things went wrong for you. I was terrified you'd end up struggling, like we've been struggling. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Dad's criticism hadn't been about education or success. It had been about fear, about a father's desperation to protect his son from financial hardship he'd been hiding from everyone. Mom continued the explanation with tears streaming down her face. We've been borrowing against the house to pay medical bills, Les. We didn't want anyone to know how bad things had gotten. Your father's pride wouldn't let him ask for help, even from family. Jake added his own confession. The business I've been bragging about. It's failing, Les. I've been putting on a show because I couldn't admit I was screwing up while you were doing so well. The MBA, the corporate job, all of it was crumbling, and I took my frustration out on you. The family honesty session continued for hours. Grace had been struggling with fixed income expenses, but hadn't told anyone. Various cousins and relatives admitted their own financial pressures, career disappointments, and personal failures they'd hidden behind criticism of my unconventional path. It was Jake who raised the topic that had apparently been discussed privately among the adults. Les, we've all been thinking. With your success and Dad's situation, maybe there's a way we can help each other. Pool resources, share financial planning, maybe even go into business together. Mom nodded enthusiastically. We could create a family foundation or a business partnership. Your financial skills combined with everyone's experience and connections. We could all benefit. The attorney Douglas Morrison appeared the next day with documents he'd prepared just in case the family decided to formalize their financial cooperation. The paperwork was complex, but the basic structure was simple. My cryptocurrency assets would be partially transferred into a family trust that would provide medical care for Dad, education funds for Jake's children, and security for other family members facing financial difficulties. Think of it as estate planning, Morrison explained. Instead of waiting for inheritance issues after death, the family can share resources while everyone is alive to benefit from them. Dad's voice was stronger than it had been since my arrival. Les, I know I have no right to ask for anything after how I treated you. But if something happens to me, I need to know Mom will be taken care of. And Grace. She's been dipping into her savings to help us with medical bills. The guilt was overwhelming. My family was drowning financially, while I lived in luxury they couldn't imagine. Dad's heart attack had been caused partly by stress over money problems that my wealth could solve easily. Grace, who'd loved me unconditionally, was depleting her retirement savings to help her son pay for medical treatments. But something felt wrong about the timing, the preparation, the convenient legal documents that had appeared so quickly. I asked for time to review everything with my own legal advisors, promising to give them an answer within a week. That night alone in my childhood bedroom, I called Patricia Wells. Patricia, I need you to verify some medical information. My father's heart attack, his diagnosis. The medical bills my family claims they've been hiding. Of course, Mr. Thompson. What specific information should I verify? Everything. I need to know if any of this is real. Patricia's preliminary report arrived by email 6 hours later. The heart attack was real, confirmed by hospital records. But the medical bills that had supposedly been devastating my family's finances, those were fabricated. Dad's insurance had covered 90% of his treatment costs, leaving a balance of less than $3,000. The financial crisis Jake described was also fictional. His business was stable and profitable, his job secure, his family finances healthy. Mom's claims about borrowing against the house to pay medical bills were completely false. The house was owned outright, with no outstanding loans of any kind. My family hadn't been struggling financially. They'd been lying systematically to manipulate me into sharing my wealth. As I sat in my childhood bedroom surrounded by memories of genuine love and happiness, I realized that my father's heart attack had provided the perfect cover for an elaborate con game designed to separate me from my fortune. The question was whether Dad's medical crisis was coincidental timing or a planned element of their scheme. I was about to discover just how deep my family's deception ran and just how far they were willing to go to get their hands on my money. I pretended to consider their proposal while secretly building the most comprehensive investigation of my life. Patricia Wells had been thorough in her preliminary findings, but I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with before making any decisions about my family's future. Patricia, I need a complete forensic audit of my entire family's finances, going back 5 years. Bank records, credit reports, property transfers, business dealings, everything you can legally access. Mr. Thompson, that level of investigation will be expensive and time-consuming. Are you certain you want to proceed? I'm certain. Money is no object. I need to know who I'm really dealing with. I also hired David Martinez, a criminal defense attorney who specialized in white-collar crime and family financial fraud. David's reputation for aggressive investigation and courtroom success was legendary among Florida's legal community. If my family was running a con game, David would find evidence that could withstand criminal prosecution. Les, you understand that if we find criminal activity, I'll be ethically obligated to recommend reporting it to law enforcement, David warned during our first meeting. I understand. Truth is more important than family loyalty at this point. While maintaining my caring son routine at the hospital, I was secretly orchestrating the most comprehensive background investigation in my family's history. Patricia's network of contacts included former FBI agents, forensic accountants, and computer specialists who could trace digital financial records that most people considered completely private. The findings began arriving within 72 hours, and each report made my family's deception more shocking. Dad's accounting firm wasn't downsizing. He'd been systematically embezzling client funds for over 3 years, using sophisticated techniques to hide the theft. Instead of facing financial hardship for medical bills, he'd been stealing money to maintain a lifestyle that exceeded his legitimate income. The firm's computers contained evidence of falsified records, shifted client accounts, and fraudulent billing practices. Your father has been extremely careful, Patricia explained during our secure phone call. He's only taken small amounts from multiple accounts spread over years, but the total theft approaches $200,000. He's created false medical expenses and family emergencies to justify withdrawals from client accounts. Jake's confession about business failure was another complete fabrication. His regional sales territory was the most profitable in his company's nationwide network. He'd received 3 promotions and 2 bonus awards in the past 18 months. His personal financial records showed regular investments, luxury purchases, and a savings account that exceeded 6 figures. But here's where it gets interesting, Patricia continued. Your brother has been borrowing heavily against his future earnings to fund cryptocurrency investments. Apparently, he's been trying to replicate your success, but his trades have been disasters. He's lost over $150,000 in the past 6 months money he borrowed using his house and his children's education funds as collateral. Mom's gambling problem was the most shocking discovery of all. Her online poker activities weren't occasional entertainment. She'd been participating in high-stakes tournaments and cash games daily sometimes for 8 to 10 hours at a stretch. Her losses over the past 2 years exceeded $90,000 money she'd taken from Grace's savings account, using power of attorney privileges Grace had granted her to manage routine financial tasks. "Your mother has been systematically looting your grandmother's retirement funds," Patricia reported with obvious disgust. "She's created false investment statements to hide the theft, making Grace believe her money is safe in conservative mutual funds. In reality, Grace's savings have been gambled away on internet poker sites." The private investigator my family had hired to research my finances was being paid with money stolen from Grace's account. They'd spent over $15,000 on surveillance legal consultations and financial planning sessions designed to figure out how to access my cryptocurrency fortune. Grace's innocent visit to my Florida villa hadn't been manipulation by my family. It had been a desperate attempt by an elderly woman to understand why her savings account statements didn't match her own records. She'd been asking family members about financial planning and inheritance issues because she was starting to realize someone had been stealing from her. "Your grandmother is the only innocent person in this entire situation," Patricia concluded. "Everyone else has been lying, stealing, or both." David Martinez's legal analysis was even more devastating. Your family has committed multiple felonies: embezzlement, elder financial abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. The evidence Patricia has gathered could support federal criminal charges against all three of them. But the most damning evidence was still being uncovered. David's computer specialists had gained access to Jake's personal communications, revealing months of planning for what they called Operation Inheritance. The scheme was sophisticated and cruel. They'd planned Dad's fake medical crisis as a way to manipulate me into returning home emotionally vulnerable. The hospital reconciliation scenes had been rehearsed with specific talking points, designed to trigger maximum guilt and sympathy. The legal documents Morrison had prepared weren't emergency estate planning. They were carefully crafted wealth transfer agreements that would give my family legal control over my cryptocurrency assets. "They've been planning this for months," David explained, showing me printouts of Jake's email communications with Morrison. "The heart attack accelerated their timeline, but the basic scheme has been in development since they first discovered your wealth." The most chilling detail was Jake's communications with a cryptocurrency specialist in Miami who'd been advising them on how to gain access to digital wallets without the owner's cooperation. They'd been researching legal techniques to declare me mentally incompetent to manage my own finances, using my history of depression and social isolation as evidence. "Your brother has been building a case to have you declared legally incapacitated," David said grimly. "Once they gained control of your finances through the family trust, they plan to petition for guardianship, arguing that your cryptocurrency obsession constituted a form of mental illness." I sat in my Florida home office, staring at evidence that my entire family had been plotting to steal my fortune while pretending to love and support me. Dad's embezzlement, Mom's gambling addiction, Jake's failed investments, and their coordinated plan to manipulate me into signing away my financial independence. But Grace remained innocent, a victim of their schemes rather than a participant. She'd been robbed of her retirement security by her own daughter-in-law, while believing she was helping family members through temporary financial difficulties. The investigation had revealed more than my family's crimes. It had shown me exactly how to destroy them all, while protecting the one person who genuinely loved me through everything. My counterattack was about to begin, and my family had no idea what was coming for them. I returned to Ohio with a plan that would end my family's schemes permanently, while giving them one chance to escape criminal prosecution. But first, I had to save Grace from financial ruin and emotional devastation. On my second day back, I visited Grace at her assisted living apartment, bringing documents Patricia had prepared showing exactly what had happened to her savings. I dreaded this conversation for weeks, knowing it would break her heart to learn that Mom had been stealing from her systematically. "Grandma Grace, I need to show you something important about your financial situation." She invited me to her small dining table making tea, while I organized the paperwork that would destroy her trust in her daughter-in-law forever. Patricia's investigation had uncovered every transaction, every false statement, every lie Mom had told to cover her gambling addiction. "Sweetheart, I've been meaning to ask you about investments," Grace said, settling into her chair. "Janet handles most of my finances now, but some of the statements don't make sense to me. She says my mutual funds are doing well, but my monthly income keeps getting smaller." I showed her the real bank records, the evidence of Mom's poker activities, the documentation proving that her retirement savings had been gambled away while she received fabricated investment reports. Grace's face went white as she processed the betrayal. "Janet took my money?" "Yes, Grandma. All of it. Over $90,000 in the past 2 years." Grace cried quietly for several minutes, not from losing the money, but from realizing that someone she'd trusted and loved had been stealing from her while pretending to help manage her affairs. "What do I do now, Les? I can't afford this apartment without my savings. I don't want to be a burden on anyone." "You're moving to Florida, Grandma. I've found you a beautiful place near my villa, with full care services and everything you need. And I'm pressing charges against Mom for elder financial abuse." That afternoon, I met with Detective Angela Rodriguez from the County Financial Crimes Unit. Patricia's evidence package was overwhelming, documenting not just Mom's theft from Grace, but also Dad's embezzlement from his accounting firm and Jake's fraudulent loan applications. "Mr. Thompson, this is one of the most comprehensive fraud cases I've seen," Detective Rodriguez said, reviewing the materials. "We can arrest all 3 of them today if you want to press charges. I want to give them one opportunity to confess and make restitution before you arrest them. But if they refuse, I want the full force of the law brought against them." The family meeting was scheduled for that evening at my parents' house. I told them I was ready to discuss the trust arrangement and had important decisions to share. Jake arrived with Morrison expecting to finalize documents that would give them access to my wealth. Mom had been cooking all day, preparing my favorite dinner, as if we were celebrating a reunion. Dad looked healthier than he had in the hospital, his color improved, and his energy returning. "Les son, we're so grateful you're considering helping the family through this difficult time." I set my laptop on their dining room table and opened Patricia's investigation files. "I've been doing some research over the past week about Dad's medical expenses, Jake's business situation, and Mom's financial management of Grace's accounts." The room went silent. Jake's confident expression faltered. Mom stopped fussing with dinner preparations. Dad's face lost color rapidly. "I know about the embezzlement, Dad. I know about your gambling, Mom. I know about your failed cryptocurrency trades, Jake. And I know about your plan to have me declared mentally incompetent so you could steal my money." I displayed the evidence systematically. Bank records showing Dad's theft from client accounts, screenshots of Mom's online poker activities, documentation of Jake's fraudulent loan applications, email communications revealing their coordinated scheme to manipulate me. Morrison stood to leave, immediately recognizing that his clients had lied to him about everything, and that his law license was now at risk. "I cannot continue to represent parties who have committed criminal fraud." Jake tried to bluster his way through denial, but the evidence was too comprehensive. His emails to the cryptocurrency specialist in Miami were displayed on my laptop screen, including detailed discussions about gaining access to my digital wallets without my consent. Dad's response was the most devastating. Instead of denying his crimes, he began justifying them. "You don't understand the pressure I've been under, Les. The medical bills, the uncertainty about the future. I only borrowed what I needed to get through difficult times. You stole $200,000 from your clients, Dad. That's not borrowing, that's theft." Mom's reaction was pure panic. "Grace doesn't need to know about any of this, Les. It would kill her." I can pay back what I borrowed from her account. Grace already knows Mom. I showed her everything this afternoon. She's pressing charges for elder financial abuse. The confrontation continued for 3 hours with each family member alternately denying, justifying, and pleading for mercy. I listened to them beg for forgiveness while offering them the deal I'd prepared with David Martinez. Here are your options. You can confess your crimes to Detective Rodriguez tomorrow morning and agree to full restitution of all stolen funds. Dad will resign from his firm and accept prosecution for embezzlement, but his cooperation might reduce his sentence. Mom will enter gambling addiction treatment and repay Grace's savings plus interest. Jake will declare bankruptcy honestly and accept responsibility for his fraudulent loans. And if we refuse, Jake asked, his MBA arrogance finally cracking, then you'll be arrested tomorrow afternoon on federal fraud charges. Dad will face 20 years for embezzlement. Mom will face 10 years for elder abuse. Jake will face 15 years for bank fraud and conspiracy. All of your assets will be seized to pay restitution to your victims. Dad suffered his second heart attack during this conversation, but this one was real, brought on by the stress of realizing his crimes had been completely exposed. As paramedics worked to save his life in their living room, I faced the most difficult decision of my life. The man who had thrown me out of his house, who had called me worthless trash, who had plotted to steal my fortune, was dying in front of me. Despite everything he'd done, he was still my father. Despite his crimes and cruelty, I couldn't watch him die without trying to help. I called the paramedics, while Jake and Mom stood frozen in shock. I provided his medical history to the emergency room doctors. I ensured he received the best possible care during transport to the hospital. But I didn't ride in the ambulance with him, and I didn't promise to drop the criminal charges if he survived. Some bridges once burned could never be rebuilt. My family had made their choices, and now they'd live with the consequences of their greed and betrayal. Justice was coming for all of them, but mercy was reserved for Grace, the only person who'd loved me without conditions or hidden agendas. Dad survived his second heart attack, though the doctors warned that his prognosis remained guarded. As he recovered in intensive care, federal agents arrested him in his hospital bed on embezzlement charges. The accounting firm where he'd worked for 20 years cooperated fully with investigators, providing additional evidence of his theft that even his own attorney couldn't dispute. Mom's arrest happened at home the following morning. Detective Rodriguez found her destroying financial documents in her backyard, trying to eliminate evidence of her gambling activities and theft from Grace's savings. The attempted destruction of evidence added obstruction charges to her elder abuse prosecution. Jake's bankruptcy filing became involuntary when his creditors discovered his fraudulent loan applications and seized his assets pending criminal prosecution. His MBA credentials couldn't save him from bank fraud charges that would likely result in federal prison time. Morrison lost his law license for facilitating their scheme, though his cooperation with investigators helped federal prosecutors understand the full scope of their conspiracy. But my focus had shifted completely to Grace and building the life I wanted, instead of destroying the family that had betrayed me. Grace's move to Florida became a celebration rather than an escape. I'd found her a luxury apartment in a retirement community, just 10 minutes from my villa, with full care services and social activities that suited her gentle personality perfectly. This place is like a resort," she said during her first week in Florida, sitting on my deck and watching dolphins play in the Gulf. "I can't believe I spent so many years worrying about money when you were there to take care of things." Grace's resilience amazed me. Despite losing her savings and learning that her daughter-in-law had been stealing from her for years, she focused on gratitude rather than bitterness. Her presence in Florida gave my life an anchor of genuine love that I'd been missing for years. "You know what I regret most?" she asked one evening, as we shared dinner on my terrace. "Not standing up to your father more when he was criticizing you. I knew you were special, but I let him convince me you needed tougher love to succeed. Grandma, you were the only one who supported my dreams when everyone else thought I was failing. You have nothing to apologize for." I should have trusted my instincts about you instead of letting their worry change my perspective. 6 months after my family's arrest, their legal outcomes reflected the seriousness of their crimes. Dad received 4 years in federal prison, but would serve most of his sentence in minimum security facilities due to his health issues. Mom accepted a plea agreement that included 2 years of supervised probation community service and mandatory gambling addiction treatment. Jake's bank fraud conviction resulted in 3 years in federal prison and permanent disqualification from financial services employment. All 3 were required to pay full restitution to their victims, which would continue for years through garnished wages and seized assets. Dad's pension was forfeited to compensate his embezzlement victims. Mom's car and jewelry were sold to begin repaying Grace's stolen savings. Jake's house was sold to satisfy his creditors and victims. The financial consequences of their crimes would follow them for decades, but the legal system had provided justice for everyone they'd harmed. Meanwhile, my life in Florida had evolved far beyond merely escaping family dysfunction. Grace's presence motivated me to become more involved in my community instead of isolating myself with wealth and technology. She encouraged me to volunteer for local charities, to make friends with neighbors, to build relationships based on mutual respect rather than family obligation. It was Grace who suggested I participate in a beach cleanup volunteer project, claiming I needed more fresh air and social interaction. You spend too much time alone with those computers, sweetheart. You need to meet people who share your values. The Saturday morning beach cleanup brought together about 30 volunteers, ranging from college students to retired professionals. We spent 3 hours removing trash from a 2-mile stretch of coastline while chatting about environmental protection, community development, and shared concerns about preserving Florida's natural beauty. That's where I met Elena Rodriguez, a marine biologist working on coral reef restoration projects throughout the Gulf of Mexico. Her passion for ocean conservation matched my own growing interest in environmental protection, but what captured my attention was her complete lack of interest in my financial status. "So you live in that gorgeous villa on the point?" she asked during our lunch break, pointing toward my property visible in the distance. "Yes, I moved here about a year ago." "Lucky you. I rent a tiny apartment above the dive shop in town, but I get to spend my days underwater with the most beautiful coral formations on the planet. I think I got the better deal." Elena's perspective on wealth and happiness was refreshing and challenging. She measured success by environmental impact and scientific discovery rather than money or possessions. Her excitement about protecting coral reefs was infectious, and her knowledge about marine ecosystems taught me to see my waterfront property as part of a larger environmental system that needed protection and stewardship. Our relationship developed slowly and naturally over several months of volunteer projects, diving expeditions, and long conversations about science, technology, and conservation. Elena's genuine interest in my cryptocurrency work came from curiosity about blockchain applications for environmental monitoring rather than interest in my profits. "You could probably develop applications to track carbon credits, monitor pollution sources, or verify renewable energy generation," she suggested during one of our evening walks along my beach. "Imagine using cryptocurrency principles to create transparent environmental accounting systems." Elena's ideas inspired me to redirect my technological skills toward environmental protection rather than purely financial gain. We began collaborating on projects that combined her marine biology expertise with my blockchain development capabilities, creating tools to monitor ocean health and track conservation efforts. Grace loved Elena, immediately recognizing in her the qualities she'd always hoped I'd find in a partner. "That girl sees your heart. Les, not just your wallet. She makes you happier than I've seen you in years." As autumn approached, I realized that my family's betrayal had ultimately freed me to build authentic relationships with people who cared about me rather than my money. Grace's unconditional love provided emotional security. Elena's environmental passion gave me purpose beyond accumulating wealth. My new friends in the volunteer community offered social connections based on shared values rather than family obligation. The previous November, I'd been hiding my success from a family that considered me a failure. This November, I was planning Grace's 85th birthday party at my villa, surrounded by people who valued my character more than my credentials. The party was perfect. Grace glowed with happiness as she met my friends from the environmental groups, charmed Elena with stories about my childhood, and marveled at how much my life had changed since moving to Florida. Elena helped me organize everything, bringing friends from the marine biology community, who shared fascinating stories about their conservation work. As the evening wound down and guests began leaving, Grace pulled me aside for a private conversation on my deck. The Gulf was calm and dark, with moonlight creating silver paths across the water. "Les, I want you to know how proud I am of the man you've become. Not because of your money, but because of your kindness. You saved me from financial ruin, gave me a beautiful new home, and helped me build a life I love. But more importantly, you chose forgiveness over revenge." "I didn't forgive them, Grandma. They're all in prison." "You forgave yourself, sweetheart. You stopped letting their mistakes define your worth. You built a life filled with people who love you for who you are, not what you have." Elena joined our conversation, slipping her hand into mine as we watched the last guests drive away. "Your grandmother is right, you know. You could have spent your life angry about what your family did to you. Instead, you chose to build something beautiful." Standing on my deck with the two women who meant everything to me, I realized that Grace was right about forgiveness. Not forgiveness for my family who had chosen greed over love and would live with those consequences, but forgiveness for myself, for all the years I'd hidden my success, apologized for my achievements, and accepted criticism I didn't deserve. My family had called me worthless trash for not having a college degree. They'd screamed, "Get out, you lowlife," and thrown me from their house like garbage. They'd plotted to steal my fortune and have me declared mentally incompetent. But their cruelty had led me to this moment: financial independence, genuine love, meaningful work, and the knowledge that success isn't measured by other people's approval, but by the positive impact you make in the world. The cryptocurrency fortune I'd built had given me options, but the relationships I'd chosen had given me happiness. Grace's wisdom had taught me about unconditional love. Elena's passion had shown me how to use wealth for environmental protection. My volunteer work had connected me with people who shared my values. Real wealth, I'd learned, wasn't the $41 million in my cryptocurrency accounts. Real wealth was the freedom to choose relationships with people who respected me, work that mattered to me, and a life that reflected my values rather than other people's expectations. My family's betrayal had been devastating, but it had also been liberating. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely free to become whoever I chose, to be surrounded by people who loved that person genuinely. As we cleaned up from the party, Elena asked me about my plans for the future. "Now that you've got your life figured out, what's next?" I looked around my villa, which had transformed from an escape into a real home filled with laughter and love. I thought about Grace's contentment in her new Florida life, Elena's coral reef research, and the environmental projects we were developing together. Next, I want to prove that money can be a tool for building something meaningful instead of just accumulating more money. I want to fund marine conservation research, develop blockchain applications for environmental monitoring, and show people that cryptocurrency can support causes that matter. "And personally?" Elena asked with a smile that made my heart race. "Personally, I want to keep building a life with people who see me clearly and love what they see. People like Grace, who taught me about loyalty. People like you, who challenge me to become better every day." Grace hugged us both goodnight, heading to her apartment with stories to share with her new friends about her grandson's beautiful party and wonderful girlfriend. As Elena and I walked along my private beach, under a sky full of stars, I marveled at how completely my life had changed in just over a year. From hiding my success in my parents' basement to hosting birthday parties in my Florida villa. From family rejection to building chosen family with people who valued authenticity over status. The journey had been painful, but it had led me exactly where I needed to be: financially secure, emotionally fulfilled, and surrounded by relationships built on mutual respect rather than obligation or manipulation. My family had taught me that blood relations don't guarantee love or loyalty, but Grace and Elena had taught me that chosen family, built on shared values and genuine care, creates bonds stronger than any biological connection. The dad who screamed, "Get out, you lowlife," had unknowingly given me the greatest gift of my life: the freedom to discover who I really was when I stopped trying to earn approval I'd never receive. Now I knew exactly who that person was, and I was proud of what I'd built. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where family members who once dismissed your dreams suddenly wanted to be part of your success? How do you think you'd handle discovering that people you trusted were planning to betray you financially? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like to help others find it. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about overcoming family betrayal and building authentic success. And please share this with anyone who needs to remember that their worth isn't determined by other people's opinions. Thank you for joining me on this journey from family rejection to finding genuine love and purpose. Remember, sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is being forced to start over, because it gives you the chance to build something even better than what you lost. Until next time, keep choosing authenticity over approval and building relationships with people who celebrate your success rather than resenting it.